Hi, this is Steve Adelman, and this is Adelman on Venues. Over the years, I've given a talk that I call the straight and narrow path, and it generally is career advice for people who are thinking about getting into either the law or some aspect of sports and entertainment or the live event industry as they're thinking about it. And the straight and narrow path story goes something like this. So many years ago, I went to school with a guy who was super smart. All my friends were kind of nerdy smart, but this guy was really, really smart. And he could have done anything. But he knew from the very beginning, from the earliest days that I knew him, that he wanted to be a certain type of engineer, and that's what he was going to do. And he never deviated from that path, from high school through college, through graduate school, to getting a job, doing exactly what he wanted, where he wanted. It was exactly his vision realized. And he was the first one of my friends to buy a house and get married and all that other stuff. And many years later, he's bored out of his mind and is the first of my friends to know exactly how many days it will be until he can retire. And I think part of the problem is, because he's always traveled this one straight, narrow path, he never had to think, what would I do if this weren't the thing? What else could I be good at? What else could I derive satisfaction from? And so now he just doesn't have the tools, the skill set to think that creatively. His thinking has always been very narrow. Consequently, now when he would like it to be broader, he just not good at that. So the career advice there is, don't worry so much about traveling a straight and narrow path, as desirable as that may be when you're starting out. And God knows it was for me. I was so envious of this guy because I drifted for years, didn't know what I would do, sort of resisted going into the law. And then when I started as a lawyer, goodness knows I didn't do this stuff. I didn't deal with safety and security at live events for several more years after I started practicing, until dumb luck, a case landed on my desk, and then I made the most of the opportunity. But the point is, for years I was envious of this guy who had traveled the straight and narrow path. Ultimately, he's not so happy. I love what I do. I'm one of the relatively few happy lawyers that I know, and I'm engaged with my work and the people with whom I work every day, and that's fun. So that's the straight and narrow path career-related story. Here's the follow-up to it from a risk management standpoint, which is really why I'm telling you this. So 2 weeks ago in my class to my Arizona State University law students, I taught them a series of very difficult cases about pyrotechnics. My class is called Risk Management in Venues. And the first question that I started them with was, why do you think we're doing pyro cases? This class is ostensibly about risk management in sports. What does that have to do with pyro? And in order to accompany the dumbfounded, confused looks of my students, I was rolling some video behind me. And the video was from a stadium, a sports stadium, where there had been a sporting event going on. So true to the mandate to deal with risk management in sports, there had been a sporting event. And so the video is rolling as I'm basically filibustering. And they can see, the students in front of me can see the video going on behind me. So they can see that it's a stadium full of people. And they can see that there's like a jumbotron or video monitor, and there's a singer singing. And so it must be some halftime related activity. And then they can see the house lights all go dark all of a sudden. And it turns out that everyone is wearing like a ring that glows in the dark, or they have, glow in the dark wristbands or something, because the whole crowd is glowing and it's this really cool image. And I'm still asking them, why do you think we're studying pyro in a class about risk management in sports? And still they're struggling. They just don't know. They don't see the connection. And I'm just going on while the video behind me is rolling until finally the singer is still singing, the glow in the dark stuff is still glowing, and then over the top of the back of the stadium roof, fireworks, fantastic. And my students collectively go, ooh, just the way everyone does when they see fireworks. And as they're saying, ooh, I can see for some of them, the light bulb illuminates over their head and they realize, oh, sports is more than just the guys wearing numbered uniforms and helmets and pads. It's more than just carrying balls and bats and engaging in competition. Incidentally, it's also more than licensing and intellectual property. No, when thinking about sports and entertainment, you want to think more broadly. And this is the connection to the straight and narrow path talk with which I began. What I was trying to get my students to realize is if they think about sports and entertainment only in the narrow sense that it is generally taught, either representing the talent or dealing with intellectual property and licensing rights, that's really narrow. And for a lot of students, neither of those two things will be a compelling choice. They don't want to babysit diva talent. And intellectual property law, frankly, is hard. I've done some of it. I'm glad to farm that out to people who really love it, because I never did. But, I told my students, if you think about sports and entertainment as the whole array of experiences that people try to attract audiences to enjoy, that opens up a whole lot more choices. It also makes you consider a whole lot of additional risks. But think about sports and entertainment the way it exists in 2019. So if you go to an event, of course, you're experiencing the event, but also you may be, I don't know, posting stuff on social media. Or if it's a sporting event, maybe you're checking your fantasy team to see how it's doing on that day, which requires knowing about other games. Or maybe you're just chatting with friends and taking selfies and not paying attention to the game. Or maybe you're there because you want to see the halftime show. Maybe it's someone, I don't know, more compelling than Maroon 5. And that's really cool, and that's going to attract you to the game. And maybe you just like a great fireworks show, and you know that the best fireworks show is during halftime of the football game. The point is, sports and entertainment is much broader than it used to be. When we started this semester with my students, I went through a whole litany of baseball cases that started with ordinary cases about fans getting hit in the head with a baseball because they weren't paying attention, or maybe they were paying attention but weren't sitting behind a screen. And the end of that line of cases involved mascots tossing wrapped hot dogs into the stand, which has nothing to do with the baseball game itself, but does have to do with the entertainment experience. And so what I try to get my students, and you, good viewer, what I try to get folks to consider is, what else is going on here? What else is part of the entertainment experience, both to attract patrons to get out of their living room and come and enjoy it in person, and also from a risk management standpoint, because that's what I deal with, from a risk management standpoint, if people think more broadly about what the event is and how people are experiencing it, then maybe they'll get to my favorite risk management question, which is, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? If you think about the event in all of its manifestations, then the question, what could go wrong, will yield many more answers that then allow you to triage the risks, the vulnerabilities, and the consequences of those vulnerabilities. And then maybe you'll think, well, what resources do I have to deal with these risks? And you'll use those resources in a way that's appropriate for your circumstances. So I was in a meeting yesterday about a very important and useful piece of technology. And one of the ideas was, hey, we can run a tabletop exercise using this technology. And, well, we could do a tabletop about active shooters. And one of the other smart guys in the room said, you know what? You could do a tabletop about active shooters, but that's not really the risk that we deal with the most. The risk that we deal with the most is more ordinary stuff. It's having to move the crowd because of severe weather, or dealing with slips, trips, and falls, or fans who get upset and want to fight it out. Those are the ordinary risks with which we deal every day. If you can do a tabletop showing your technology addressing those risks, now you're talking to us. Now you're speaking our language. And so, all of this starts from a simple piece of career advice that I, frankly, started giving myself when I was down and feeling kind of lost early in my career, and frankly, not so early in my career also. Since then, it's evolved into a whole way of thinking about risk and safety, which is, if you think about it narrowly, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. And you're not going to do a good job answering the fundamental, most open-ended question I can think of, which is, what could go wrong? But if you deviate from that straight and narrow path, if you consider the essence of the event, whatever event it is that you're talking about, if you think more broadly about what that event is, then you'll also think more broadly about the risks that it involves. Then, if you ask, what could go wrong? You'll actually get to a good place. You'll get to an answer that you may not have predicted when you started. But of course, that's the point. Getting to a place that you couldn't have predicted unless you started the analysis, went down the path which is not straight and narrow. That's where you'll see things that you might not have seen unless you looked there in the first place. So that's my new straight and narrow path talk. I'm Steve Adelman. This has been Adelman on Venues. Thanks.